Hey everybody, Tony Cosmai from GreatVocalMajority.com. And you ever notice when you see somebody doing this, they curl their index finger up against their thumb and they hold their three fingers out like that. 99.999% of everyone everywhere recognizes that for what it is. It's the OK sign, right? Except in today's environment, something as innocent as the OK sign can be turned into a symbol of hate at the speed of light. Yeah, a symbol of hate, I swear. There's a war going on in cyberspace. There's a real war going on, an all-out war, which is, if it's not really dealt with effectively, it's going to spill into the real world and real war. The kind with blood, death, and destruction, that kind of war. Now, one aspect of this war is information. There's disinformation and there's misinformation. And you probably haven't thought about what the difference is between those. They're pretty close to the same thing, but they're not exactly. Disinformation is really something the government does. It's false information or propaganda that it's intended to mislead, especially from a government organization to a rival power or to the media. Misinformation is something anybody can do. It's a false or inaccurate information which is deliberately intended to deceive. Now, in this post, what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide an example of misinformation. Now, this piece of misinformation began in early 2017, right after Trump was inaugurated, by an anonymous group engaging in such practices, a group called 4chan. The number 4 is C-H-A-N. Now, this group targeted left-wing partisan media outlets and a George Soros-funded leftist partisan watchdog group that everybody's heard of called Media Matters. And groups like 4chan, well, they like to launch campaigns against leftist-led groups because they find them to be more gullible and willing to believe almost anything about their political adversaries, and that's what happened in this case I'm about to tell you about. Now, according to the Anti-Defamation League, this OK hand gesture, hoax, it's a hoax. It's not really a white supremacist symbol. It began in February 2017 when an anonymous 4channer announced something called Operation OKKK. Get it? So telling other members that we must flood Twitter with social media and other social media websites claiming that the OK hand sign is a symbol of white supremacy. So the user even provided a helpful graphic showing how the letters W, these three fingers end up looking like a W, and then this here with your hand is like a P, going from here down, that's like a P. So that means white power, you see. This is how these people think. They just start this stuff and then liberals believe it. So they even tried to launch some hashtags like hashtag not okay, hashtag power hand privilege. And the intent of these people was to force them, these liberal lunatics, to dig more until the rest of society isn't going anywhere with this stuff. Now, some people think that means that they're right-wingers, alt-right people, actual neo-Nazis. We don't know any of that. We don't really know that. This is all speculation at that point. I mean, they could be, but we don't know. Now, following the cues of this hoax's originator, 4chaners created fake email accounts. They created fake Twitter accounts. They bombarded civil rights organizations. This is all according to the ADL, by the way. And others with messages that furthered that OK hoax. The Soros-funded website, Media Matters, which wouldn't exist, by the way, if it weren't for George Soros's money, immediately took the bait and published an article that you'll see in the website, and I'll have in the video as well. And that article remains uncorrected 20 months later. Now, that's just evidence, as far as I'm concerned, that Soros and David Brock, and if you don't know who David Brock is, he's the the gay, fanatical leftist who used to be a conservative that now runs Media Matters. And it shows that they just have a greater interest in slander than they do in the truth. So by allowing it to go uncorrected, Media Matters now becomes a participant in this hoax. They make it seem credible, even though they know it's a hoax. The OK sign is basically used by everyone, including President Trump, by the way, who's always doing this, right? In his speeches, he's always making that gesture with his hand and the OK sign. So now people who read Media Matters, who don't see the correction, don't see the retraction, they immediately think, hey, President Trump is dog whistling. He's dog whistling. Look at him. There he is. He's giving that white supremacist hand sign. I saw it on Media Matters. That's what's happening now. Now, I understand how this seems. Does anyone really believe that the OK sign is a symbol of hate and white supremacy? Yeah. Sadly, yeah. There are people who do. This is what happens when you have biased and partisan news outlets and websites run with this garbage as soon as they get it, simply because it fits their narrative of who they think their political enemy, in this case Trump, and who they think he really is, and of course who they think his supporters are. And but later, see what happens though is that later, when it's discovered that the whole thing is a hoax, those news outlets and websites almost never run a retraction. And if they do, it's not at the same level of intensity as the original report. They're embarrassed, so they hide it. And that's only if they run a retraction at all. Remember, Media Matters still has the original post up uncorrected. Now here's one example of an outlet that actually did correct their original story, and I give them some credit for that. The UK Independent initially reported that the ADL recognized this gesture as a symbol of white supremacy, which they did not. It was wrong. Their initial report said that the ADL recognized this OK sign as a symbol of white supremacy. Untrue. They were mixing it up with something else that the ADL did say. So what they did say in the Independent in their retraction was that they were confusing it with a two-hand gesture for white supremacy. I have no idea what they're even talking about, but it's a gesture that's used that takes two hands to use, and it has no bearing at all with this. So they got it mixed up, but they published a correction, which is right and proper to do, and they did it in the original posted article that had the wrong information, which is excellent, because if people go to the article and read it, they'll see the correction there at the bottom. And I think that even though I think that correction could have been a little better, at least they did something to correct it, and I think that's good. But the same can't be said for Media Matters, same can't be said for Yahoo News, same can't be said for a lot of these other news outlets who offered no retraction, at least not one that I could locate. And it should be in the original article, shouldn't it? Just like the UK Independent did. Incidentally, this hoax didn't just happen once. This is where this really just kind of takes off into la la land of lunacy, because what happened was this started in February of 2017, just a few weeks after Trump was inaugurated. And then it kind of died down because it was called out as a hoax. But then it resurfaced again just a couple months later in April of 2017. And that's according to the Anti-Defamation League, okay? So the OK hoax was actually just the most recent in a series of hoaxes in which 4chaners and members of other similar places on the internet, such as 8chan and Reddit, have tried to take innocuous items, things like this, symbols, gestures, and other things, and falsely attribute them to white supremacist meaning in order to fool liberals. This is according to the ADL. They're liberal, and they're saying this is all intended to fool liberals, and it's fooling them over and over. The same thing, to spread false messages. Now, The third and most recent iteration of this happened during the first day of the confirmation hearings for the Supreme Court Justice nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Social media lit up with a picture of Kavanaugh's aide sitting there with her hands on her lap with this, like this. And I mean, she was probably scratching her leg or something, but it doesn't matter. It was in that shape. So many on the left, again, for the third time, took the bait. Now the question has to be asked, why? Why do leftists continue to believe this hoax? And the ADL offered an explanation. And this is not about the Kavanaugh thing, but goes back to 2017. They're also a response to the willingness of many on the left in the United States to believe that the Trump administration is full of hardcore white supremacists, a belief so powerful that the Trump administration is full of hardcore white supremacists that recently a photo of a White House staffer, now this is going back to 2017, where Stephen Miller is like adjusting his suit and tie before an interview, and a picture of it, because he had this, was like, oh look, he's signaling his white supremacist friends that are watching on television that, yeah, don't worry, I'm with the plan, white power. That's what people are really looking at and believing. And I mean, it's insane. Again, this is the dog whistle mentality. People thinking that these are dog whistles. That seems to me, coming from the ADL, however, to be really an incomplete answer. Because the reason why this stuff continues to be believed is because of websites like Snopes. And here's what I mean. Snopes is allegedly a fact checker. And they reviewed Kavanaugh's aide, Zena Bush. I keep calling her Bush. Zena Bash. Now, Zena Bash was sitting behind him. She's the one that had her hand on her lap. And it looked like she was flashing this OK sign. But the Snopes explanation really offers more insight into Snopes than it does into what actually happened with Zena Bash. Because what happened is they really reflect how useless Snopes is, and I'll explain what I mean by that, and other fact checkers too, because if you look at the ADL report on this, the headline of their report says, no, the OK sign is not a hate symbol. And instead of focusing on that and all that ADL had to say about that not being a hate symbol, instead, what Snopes focused on was this two-hand gesture that nobody's ever used. Nobody in the Trump administration, nobody associated with Trump, not Brett Kavanaugh's aide, nobody has ever used this two-handed symbol or gesture or whatever it is that is unrelated. But Snopes says, hey, wait a minute though, there is a symbol that relates to white supremacy. But what are they doing? Are they really fact checking at that point? Because if this is not a symbol of white supremacy and this is what Zena Bash is doing, then Zena Bash is not flashing a white supremacist symbol. Can we all agree with that? Why is it so hard for Snopes to admit that? And I'll tell you why it is. Because Snopes knows who reads their site. And they don't want to insult their intelligence, or lack of it, because they've been taken in by a hoax 3 times in the last 20 months. The same hoax, not a different hoax each time, the same hoax that this is a symbol of white supremacy when it's not. Instead, there's some other two-hand thing going on that nobody's ever used, and they're saying, well, they want to leave it still like an open question. Well, maybe Zena Bash really is something, but she's just, using this because she knows that it'll get a reaction and a rise out of the left. That's not fact-checking anymore. That's excusing stupidity. on the part of people who keep getting fooled by the same damn hoax. And that's why I think that all of this is ridiculous. And on top of that, Zena Bash is Hispanic on one side of her family, in other words, not white. And on the other side of her family, they're Jewish and Holocaust survivors. Does that sound like your typical profile of a white supremacist? I would say no, it doesn't. So I guess when you're Snopes and you want to defend your readers because you don't want to call them gullible and stupid, you know, you will take any port in a storm, I suppose. And I guess they did. So what are we saying here? We now have ample, clear, and convincing evidence that the American left is experiencing some type of mass hysteria and paranoia. There doesn't seem to me to be any other adequately reasonable explanation of the fact that so many people continue to be taken in by something that has been proven to be a hoax twice before. This last episode with Zena Bash. Twice in the last 20 months. Especially when the ADL is run by liberals. The head of the ADL was like a friend of Barack Obama. I mean, they don't have an axe to grind here in favor of Trump or Zena Bash. But what this is a terrible sign of the mental health of a great many people in our country. When they become so convinced that something that is provably false and for which they consider something like this to be an existential threat to them, without responsible people in the media and on the internet placing the truth ahead of their partisan agenda, America and Americans are going to suffer. Groups instigating chaos like 4chan and others should not have their lies and rumors propagated by anyone, much less partisan outfits like Media Matters and convicted felons like George Soros. That's it for me. I'm Tony Codispoti. Thanks for watching. Please take a look at the video in the YouTube channel and the links I've given you there. And if you can, subscribe. Thanks. Take care.